Hello guys, today is part 3 in learning how to read when you're dyslexic by a dyslexic, okay? So this part is all about why is it hard for a dyslexic person to learn to read? Why is that hard? Why is that challenging? And today we're going to go in detail, and I tried to spend a long time planning this to write out, okay, what would be the right things to say, because there's so much you can say, there's so much science, so much evidence, studies to be done on this, but I gave together some of the most accurate, some of the most simple and kind of like clear defined ways of looking at it, okay? I think it'll be really helpful to you, because I feel like that's what I like to think about. Why is it hard for dyslexics to read? So guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and as well guys, the spots are going to fill up very soon to speak to me on like half an hour completely free basis about how you could improve your reading, or with your little ones, how could they improve their reading. Okay, so there'll be a link down below to schedule that in. I hope you enjoy today's episode, guys. So the big question is this: how can dyslexics like us create a place, a community, a tribe where people at any stage of life can come and solve any challenge, amplify their strengths, and ultimately help them become who they were meant to be, or in other words, conquer their dyslexia? That is the question, and this show is the answer. My name's Theo Goff, and welcome to the Conquering Dyslexia Podcast. Okay guys, so this is part 3 of learning how to read by a dyslexic, okay? So in this part, it's all about specifically why is it hard for a dyslexic person to learn to read? I know in the past we talked about how reading is actually complex, and then in part 2 we spoke about the differences in the brain, about how a dyslexic brain is actually different, functions different when reading than a non-dyslexic brain, and how actually we got to start turning it so it works, so the brain works in a different, slightly different way, so it's a lot more effective, okay? So that's one thing that we talked about, but one thing I want to dive in this episode is, so when we come to teaching, when we come to the actual application of learning to read, where dyslexics fall short is always when it comes to the understanding the very first building block of language, which is phonics. It's understanding the phonics of the word. When you see a word, when the word breaks down into its component parts, that's when you've got to understand these individual parts. These are our phonics. And we've got to understand, okay, these are our phonics, and understand the sounds they make, and blending the sounds together to make a new sound and a word. Okay, and this is what dyslexics have difficulty with. And a good indication for when you're quite young of learning, if a child might have dyslexia, or like spotting a child with dyslexia, is them having trouble with understanding the phonics. It's like, I remember I spent years and years doing this in school, but they would have like loads of words laid out on like a list, and you would read the list of words, and look, these were nonsense words. It's like two sounds like ba, or like you mean CMA, kama. You know what I mean? And it's about understanding the phonics, and you would say the phonics over and over again. It doesn't matter if it's right word or wrong word, or if it says a word. It's all about seeing what two sounds together would make, and understanding there's like 44 different phonic sounds, and you mean how CH, a k, a k, and a h makes sh, ch, an S and a H make sh, and understanding them, blending them together, and testing them out. I spent years and years doing that in my dyslexia school. I remember one thing when it coming to kind of like the end years of my dyslexia school, because at the start, when you're kind of very dyslexic, so I was very dyslexic, and they would get me doing all these tests, and then they would say to my parents, same advice every single year for 8 years straight almost. He's improving slowly but surely. Slowly but steadily, he's getting slowly better and better and better, which means I'm still improving slow. They want me to improve faster, so I'll be kind of on a better level, but at the moment I was in the lowest in the dyslexic school in my English capabilities. So when I was a lot younger, I A lot of it wasn't, I didn't have the power to change. Say, for example, if they put me in the dyslexic program, I improved, I feel confident and I feel better in myself, but I didn't. I didn't feel better. Like, I didn't. Yes, there's little improvements, and each year we would have, or maybe each semester or whatever term, we'd have this little English test to do. And I remember it's the same words over and over and over again, and reading these words. I remember getting a tiny bit better on them each, like, you know what I mean, like twice a year. And it didn't fill me up with confidence, to be honest, because you see the gap between me and my peers were getting more and more and more and more different. Like in a dyslexic school, the other people were normal, and I was a dyslexic one in a dyslexic school, as it were. And there was a very, very few people that was nearly as severe as me, or around about the same severity. But I remember coming to the end of that, like the last year, and I don't know why, they had me do this toe by toe. Now, if you haven't heard of toe by toe, it's like this little workbook that you go through. Someone goes through a review, you say sounds, and then you read stuff. And then I think that there's a writing section as well. When you get it right, there's a tick. If you get it wrong, there's a dot. You get 3 ticks, you can move on to the next word. I remember doing this, and this has actually inspired me to do other dyslexic work on myself. But yes, the sounding words is interesting, and you know what I mean, the spelling is good, and yes, I'm getting better at spelling, better at this. But for me, what was most kind of fulfilling part was the ticks. Was having a system that's very simple, that I understand, that I can see progress in. Oh, that's ticked. I completed that. I completed that. I completed that. It's like a game. You complete levels. Oh, I completed this, completed this, completed this, completed this. Oh, I'm stuck on this. This is a challenge. Let's go and complete this. Rather than saying, okay, we got to learn the whole of English. Let's start with the days of the week. Let's start with the months. And let's learn it. After you learn this, great, high five. Let's go on to something else. And the learning, it would go through a process of sitting down and, you know what I mean, working on it, and then coming back the next day, sitting down and working on it. And it's really hard to actually visually see your progress over time. And that kind of like, for me, that sort of learning, coming in, learning and leaving, coming in, learning and leaving, without having a very simple way of tracking it, was less motivating than having a simple way. Okay, tick, I got that way, tick, that I got that way, tick, I got that way. And I remember, so I took this method and I actually felt like I was learning a bit there. And then I applied it when I was in my 6th form and wanting to learn my English. Got my little, what I call muck dyslexia, called it F dyslexia art book, but I changed it to muck dyslexia, it's more child friendly. But when writing down in my little notebook, I would make sure I had 3 ticks at the end of each word before I can move on and say, okay, that word's complete. And I'll keep going until I get 3 ticks with each word. And a tick would mean that I'm not looking at the word, I could spell it correctly 3 times. If I spell it correctly 3 times, that's a tick. And then, because sometimes I can spell it correctly once, and then the second time I don't spell it correctly. And once I have 3 ticks, then I can move on. And that's really motivating for me. And later out, I worked on basically, I created this massive phonics wall I got onto, this phonics wall that I created. And it's like all the phonics I could find. By the way, that was like, there's more than 44, there's like over 50, I think I found, phonics. I worked on this with my really good friend, helped me on my book, like one of my best friends. And she helped create this with me, so I'm kind of confident that this was a phonic. And I'd always ask her, is this a phonic? And she'd go, yes or no. And a lot of times she said, well, yeah, it is. So I'd add it to the rule, and I played this little game with myself. And this is where phonics becomes so integral with learning to read. Dyslexics find it hard because the part of our brain, stuff, a part of our brain isn't really good at analysing and looking at and creating like patterns between things that make no sense. Now we'll get onto that, talking about it. But basically I created this phonics wall back at home with all the different phonics on it, and it was a big, like bigger than an A1 sheet of paper. And I'd do a little test. I'd look at a word that I'm trying to learn to read. I still do the 3 ticks system, but I'd look at a word that I'm learning to read, and I'd try and break it down. And maybe in school, if it's a phonic with two different letters together to make a sound, to make a phonic sound, you'd put a line underneath it. Or if it's one of those things where it's like an E at the end of the word and the vowel would make a certain sound, that's kind of like a different phonic, as it were. A different spelling rule. And then you would kind of do a line, dot, or you do a little like underneath line to make sure that this makes a sound. If you know what I mean, like a line dot to say the sounds of the word. Okay, this is a digraph, trigraph, which is a couple sounds together. Digraph is 2, trigraph is 3, and I think there's a one for 4 and 5. But you draw that out, and I try and dissect and understand every single word as I was doing it, so I could put it in place and make it kind of like make sense of the word. And a little challenge for me to do that, and that really helped kind of unmasking the mystery of English, as it were. It's a good little discipline that I think really helped me. But that phonics was really valuable. And as well, so one system, because there's multiple times in our lives, I think, that we work on something. And there's multiple times in my life I've worked on my English. Currently, I'm reading because of this reading method, but I'm not working on my like, definitely not handwriting and not my spelling. I've worked on it many times before in the past. And I don't have massive reason to work on it at the moment. But when I was working it back then, worked on it for a good old year. I remember I got to like, it wasn't consecutively, but I'd like miss a day or so. But I remember I did TikTok videos like day 179 of me improving my English having dyslexia. And basically, I would show a day of me trying to learn 20 words. And I would try and learn 20 words, and I would basically write the word out over and over again by looking at the word spelling, and then I'd turn the page over and try and spell those words without looking at it. If I get it right, tick. If I get it wrong, like an X or a dot. And I'll try to get 3 ticks in a row to move on. And I got through like hundreds of words. I was really, my learning dramatically improved. But the reason why I improved because of foundations of phonics. And the building, what us dyslexics find hard is our phonics. And also learning that, we do learn in a multi-sensory way. And something I'll get onto in later episodes is you've got to find your own learning style. Your learning style is different than others. And you've got to find what works for you. But one thing that, like, you have to use your senses. So multi-sensory, what they teach you in learning, kind of like in the Autumn Gillingham approach and all these others, is okay. Cat, cat, and it works. It's like you have 5 senses. Trying to activate all 5 senses when it comes to learning. Therefore, it ingrains in your memory a lot more. There's loads of studies and stuff and science behind that. But that's kind of thing what I really want to incorporate. And best thing, I use voice much as possible. I close my eyes, can visualize it, and I use my finger sometimes. But it's about using multi-sensory that works for you and adding those foundations of phonics, okay? Now, why? So phonics and also a system that works like, motivates you. Because one thing I think missing all the time that none of the teachers value, it's that having a system where you can see your progress in a really easy way that you're in charge of as a learner. Because I'm doing it because I want to learn. But I want to see something that sees the progression, that motivates me to keep going. This is such unvalued technique. It's like in a game. What keeps someone playing a game is they can see their progress. So much what keeps people motivated in going to the gym, in doing things, hard endeavors, is that seeing progress is the biggest motivator for them. And for us dyslexics, if we get a system more that motivates us, not about how much maybe we've learned towards the bigger goal of being perfect at reading, but how much time and effort we spend into it. And it's like so many different ways we could be rewarded for learning to read or learning to spell. So anyway, bit off track. That's the foundations we use for learning English. But then we come back, let's take a big back step into why do we find that hard? Why do we find phonics hard? And the simplest way we can explain it is in the thinking style. Please, this is she does a podcast called Dyslexia Podcast. I've just paid a little money for this little course. So this is the way she explained it, and it's so simple. I love it. It's that this is a dyslexic thinking style. It's that a dyslexic thinking style would think in big picture. We think in big picture at the expense of details that do not contribute to the narrative of the whole. Now, this may, be a lot of jargon, but another simpler way to think, if you're dyslexic, you get it 100%. But another simpler way of thinking is like, you can see the forest at the expense of the detail of the trees. It's about looking at the globe instead of looking at the country. It's about looking at the country instead of looking at the town. looking at the town instead of looking at the house. You know what I mean? It's taking a big step back and seeing everything as a whole and how it all works as a big connected system rather than looking at the details. Because what we find hard is detailed. What we find hard is specific little things, minute details, minute facts. That's really hard to gain in the whole. Now I spent a lot of podcasts talking about this, but this is why I find it hard with learning, you know what I mean, learning simple facts like dates of things, like calendar things, like learning names. I find it so hard to learn names because why does this name fit with the whole of who you are as a person, your personality, this and that, and learning lists. And there's so many things like grammar. Learning, like, why does a comma have to go here? Why does it have to go here? I'm telling you, what I mean? It's so hard for us to make sense of why it happens a certain way. And also, because we're so good at learning the whole and so bad at finding the little detail, because we're so good at the whole, bad at detail, is that we find it really hard to notice little spelling errors. That we know our errors, but we just skim over and we're reading, go, yeah, this is fine. Then someone else goes to look at it, see, there's 6 little errors in here, and they point out, and you're thinking, how did that get there? I didn't see it when I was looking at it. But that is because we think things as a whole. When we're reading through what we wrote, we're not looking at every single word, we're just looking at the story, the system behind it. And I'm really excited to talk about later about the other things that we can get into. But yeah, so the story, the narrative behind it, about everything that's interconnected, okay? So, it's a long episode. I'm sorry, guys, try to make it shorter. That's why dyslexics find it hard to read. One is the phonics. Obviously, loads of automation and psychological issues that we can talk about. But basically, understanding the fundamental building blocks of English is the phonics. It's the sounds. And the good way of testing is when you break a word down and get a kid to answer, to break down the phonics. Say, what does this sound, this sound, this sound? Dyslexic kids find that very, very hard, okay? And reason why they find it hard, because they're big picture people. They're not down to detail. And in a way that we can teach dyslexics in a better way is giving them a reason to understand everything. Like, honestly, like, I remember once for me, like with all the global warming stuff, I remember chatting to this one guy about global warming, and he's like a scientist or whatever, and then he basically broke it down to me in an extremely easy way. Now I can visualize it and explain it. It's like global warming is so it's not like we are taking stuff out from outside the planet in and burning it and using it in a way that causes global warming. We are taking stuff within the planet and changing it and using it in a way that's harmful. It's like, you see it in harmful. Now you probably heard that's really simple, but how I visualize it, it's like when you're in like a river and the water is really, really clear and there's like sand and sort of mud at the bottom of the water, but it's just settled and it's really, really clear. The water's clear, but the sand is settled. And when you put your foot in or slap your hand in the water, all that dust and mud gets kicked up from the water and into the basically the water, and now the water's really murky. That's what we're doing to Earth, exactly. We're slapping our hand down in this very clear, let's say, in very clear skies, slapping it down into our actual core, into our actual rock, and kicking up all the dirt into our atmosphere to make our atmospheres bad. Because we're just getting resources and using it and changing its form, and that's making things bad in the world. Anyway, I'm not doing it to tell you, I'm just doing it as an example of how, once you explain things as a whole and explain how everything connects to the overall narrative, the overall story, the overall system, it's so much easier for dyslexics to understand that. So that's one little takeaway. We can use it for dyslexic in our own life to understand things better, or for teaching dyslexics. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this very long episode. I'll see you all again for part 4.